cold wind cuts through Atlanta's streets as the first news of the presidential pardon for the Chrisleys echoes through the newscasts. In a Pentagon office, General Michael Harrison closes his eyes as he reads the report. Another controversial pardon he'll need to explain to European allies at the next NATO meeting. "Sir, we have Kiev on the line," announces his aide, Major Sarah Chun. They want to understand how this affects military aid agreements. Harrison sighs deeply. Todd and Julie Chrisley, reality show stars convicted of defrauding banks of millions of dollars in tax evasion, have just been pardoned by the American president. To the domestic audience, it might seem like just another celebrity story. To the world, it's a dangerous signal. Major Chun, prepare a briefing for our embassy in London, Harrison orders, looking out the window at Washington's gray horizon. They're going to question our moral credibility again. The Chrisley case doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's part of a troubling pattern that's been establishing itself. Presidential pardons benefiting wealthy public figures, while American soldiers ask allies to trust American justice and integrity in joint operations worldwide. At Ramstein Air Base, Germany, Colonel James Mitchell receives a call he dreaded. German command wants to discuss inconsistencies in American justice application before approving the next phase of joint operations in Eastern Europe. How do we explain to our German partners that we ask them to trust our institutions? Mitchell questions on the phone with Washington. When our own justice system appears to have two faces, the precedent is being set. Celebrities and public figures with connections receive special treatment, while America asks the world to believe in its moral leadership. Each controversial pardon undermines a bit more of the credibility that took decades to build. In Moscow, Kremlin analysts are already preparing propaganda material. See how American democracy works. They'll say, justice for the rich, prison for the poor. It's free ammunition for authoritarian regimes that America fights globally. Impact on alliances. Brussels, Belgium, NATO headquarters. Rain drums against the windows of the NATO building as diplomats from 31 countries gather for an extraordinary session. The official topic is cooperation in counterterrorism operations, but everyone knows the real conversation will happen in the corridors. We need to talk about the elephant in the room. The French representative discreetly tells American Ambassador Robert Stevens during a break, "How do you expect us to explain to our parliaments that we should follow American moral guidance when you pardon financial criminals?" Stevens, a 30-year veteran of diplomacy, feels the familiar weight of shame. He's been through this before, after other controversial pardons, after domestic scandals that reverberate internationally. Each time it becomes harder to defend the American position. In the meeting room, NATO Secretary General, a pragmatic Norwegian, gets straight to the point. "Gentlemen, our collective credibility depends on each member's credibility. When one of our main allies demonstrates inconsistency in their declared values, it affects our ability to justify joint operations to our citizens." The Polish representative is more direct. "You ask us to confront Russia based on democratic principles and rule of law. How do we explain this when you pardon millionaires who rob banks?" In London, the British Prime Minister faces tough questioning in Parliament. How can we justify defense spending on joint operations with a nation that applies selective justice? Asks an opposition member. The official response is diplomatic, but the damage is already done. Each European ally now has internal ammunition against American military cooperation. Opposition parties will use these pardons to question defense agreements for years. In Japan, the impact is equally devastating. The Japanese government, already pressured by public opinion about American military presence, faces new protests. Why do we defend a nation that doesn't follow its own laws? Protesters ask in Tokyo. Colonel Stevens, military attaché in Seoul, reports to Washington. The South Koreans are questioning our moral leadership in the region. How do we ask them to follow our anti-corruption protocols when we pardon corruption at home? Each controversial presidential pardon doesn't just affect American domestic politics. It weakened alliances built over decades, undermines trust in joint military operations, and offers free propaganda to adversaries. Credibility under fire. Kabul, Afghanistan Joint Operations Center, Archive, 2021. Command center screens flash with real-time information as Major General Patricia Williams coordinates the final withdrawal from Afghanistan. At the time, she never imagined that 3 years later she'd be explaining to refugee Afghan officers why America pardons wealthy criminals while abandoning allies who risked everything. Washington, D.C. present. General Williams, we have a problem, Colonel Davis informs, entering her Pentagon office. Our contacts in Pakistan are questioning our counterterrorism cooperation proposal. They specifically cite recent pardons as evidence that we can't be reliable partners. Williams removes her glasses and rubs her eyes. As a career officer, she's seen America build and lose credibility multiple times. But this time is different. The pardons aren't seen as just domestic politics. They're interpreted as systemic failure of American character. Colonel, prepare a report for the Joint Chiefs. We need to quantify the operational impact of these political decisions. The numbers are devastating. Since 2022, 12 joint intelligence operations have been canceled or delayed due to trust issues raised by international partners. Countries that previously shared sensitive information now hesitate, questioning whether America truly represents the values it claims to defend. In Syria, Kurdish commanders, crucial allies in the fight against ISIS, express growing skepticism. How do we know you won't abandon us again? A Kurdish commander asked General Stevens during a video conference, if you pardon criminals at home, what guarantee do we have that you'll honor commitments to us? The impact goes beyond military operations. American intelligence agencies report growing difficulties recruiting international informants. Why should I trust a country that doesn't enforce its own laws? Questions a potential asset in Istanbul. In Africa, where the United States competes with China and Russia for influence, the damage is particularly severe. African governments, already skeptical about American intentions, now have concrete evidence of American hypocrisy to justify partnerships with Beijing or Moscow. Mr. President, writes the American ambassador in Senegal in a classified cable, each controversial pardon here is interpreted as evidence that our declared values are just rhetoric. We lost 3 military cooperation agreements this month. General Harrison, now in his 3rd decade of service, reflects on the cruel irony. American soldiers died defending values that political leaders seem to casually discard. Each controversial pardon doesn't just undermine current operations, it mortgages the future of American leadership. Geopolitical consequences. Beijing, China, Strategic Analysis Center. Li Wei, senior analyst at China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, smiles as he reviews the report on American presidential pardons. For him, each controversial pardon is a strategic gift, concrete evidence of American moral decay that China can use to justify its own authoritarian model. See how Western democracy works. Li prepares for the next presentation to African diplomats. Laws for the poor, pardons for the rich. Is this what they want to export to you? China's strategy is simple but effective. Use American inconsistency to undermine Western credibility globally. Each country that questions American moral leadership is an opportunity for Beijing to expand its influence. Moscow, Russia, Kremlin, in the Russian presidential office, advisors prepare the next disinformation campaign. American pardons offer perfect material for RT and other Russian propaganda platforms. We don't need to invent anything, explains Dmitry Kozlov, director of strategic communications. We simply amplify their own contradictions. They do our work for us. Russia uses each controversial pardon to justify its own human rights violations. Where's the difference? Argue Russian diplomats in international forums. At least we're honest about our system. Washington, D.C., National Security Council. National Security Advisor Dr. Elizabeth Hayes faces a grim reality in her weekly briefing to the president. The impact report on presidential pardons reveals consequences that go far beyond domestic politics. Mr. President, she begins, choosing words carefully, our ability to lead international coalitions is being systematically compromised. Each controversial pardon offers ammunition to our adversaries and weakens allies' trust. The numbers are irrefutable. Asterisk 15 joint military operations delayed or canceled. Asterisk 8 intelligence agreements suspended. Asterisk 23 countries publicly questioning American moral leadership. Asterisk 34% growth in Chinese influence in regions where the U.S. traditionally dominated. The cost isn't just diplomatic. Hayes continues. We're losing the global narrative war. China and Russia no longer need to work hard to undermine our credibility. We do it for them. General Harrison, present at the meeting, adds a military perspective. Sir, our field commanders report growing difficulties maintaining operational alliances. When we pardon financial crimes at home while asking allies to follow our ethical standards, we create unsustainable contradictions. The price of inconsistency. The Chrisley story becomes a symbol of a larger problem: how seemingly minor domestic political decisions can have devastating geopolitical consequences. Each controversial pardon doesn't exist in a vacuum. It becomes a tool for adversaries and a source of embarrassment for allies. The final question remains: can a superpower maintain global leadership when it demonstrates inconsistency in its own values? The answer may determine the future of the world order established after 1945. For adversaries like China and Russia, the answer is clear. The era of American moral hegemony is ending, pardon by pardon, contradiction by contradiction, and they're ready to fill the vacuum left by declining American credibility. Conclusion for the Conflict Zone channel. The Chrisley case illustrates how decisions that seem purely domestic reverberate on the global geopolitical stage. In a world where credibility is power, each internal inconsistency undermines America's ability to lead coalitions, maintain alliances, and compete effectively with rival powers. The lesson is clear. In an era of instant information and global competition, there's no longer just domestic politics for a superpower. Every action, every decision, every pardon becomes ammunition in the great geopolitical game.